Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation today. This is the KASFAA presentation for counselors. We're going to talk about professional judgment and special circumstance deep dive. My name is Michele Arellano, and I will be the moderator for today. But I do have two presenters, Michele Page-Bradford and Randi Whalen, who will be discussing this topic today. If you have any questions at all, please enter them in the chat, and then we'll answer throughout the presentation and definitely hold some answers, question answer session for the end. So we can go ahead and get started.
Hi, everyone. I am Michele Page-Bradford. I am a financial aid specialist at Wichita State University. And I'm going to just go ahead and share through our agenda really fast. We're going to be covering just a quick FAFSA refresher for anyone who might not be familiar with any new updates to that for the 26-27 aid year. And then independent statuses for students, homeless students, unusual circumstances, professional judgments, and then we're going to go through some special circumstance examples in case anything pops up that might be kind of odd. It would be nice to know. Okay, let's get started with the FAFSA refresher. Um, so like I said, this is for the 26-27 FAFSA. Of course, you go to studentaid.gov for that. It is using the 2024 tax information. As a reminder to students, they do have to file this every year. I feel like that's one of the main things that we hear is, oh, I didn't know that I needed to file every year. They definitely need to do that. And then keep in mind that some schools have different priority dates. So if they're looking at a certain school, they need to look at what their priority dates are for that school. Next. Okay, so we're going to talk about contributors. A contributor on a FAFSA is anyone that's required to provide information, a signature, or consent. Information is provided, um, either a parent or a spouse of a student. Most of the time, you're probably working with those who are like in high school, so they're going to have their parents as contributors. A big thing to remind those contributors is that just because their information is on the FAFSA, they are not responsible for that student's educational expenses. So who is a contributor? Kind of like I said, it's usually the parents. So keep in mind that it's biological or adoptive parents. Obviously, the student is also a contributor, but then a spouse or the parent's spouse. So there's a parent one and parent two in the FAFSA. A contributor is not non-adoptive grandparents, foster parents, a fiance, or any other biological parent that's not married or that don't live with the parent that's on the FAFSA form. Um, Identifying contributors is kind of tricky sometimes, but these factors will help. Dependency status, marital status, and tax filing status. And then these are a couple of links that are helpful in determining who should be a contributor on the FAFSA. There is an interactive tool that really is helpful. So I would suggest that your students go and use that if they're unsure about who they need to add. Okay, so independent students don't have to have a contributor. So if they happen to be born before January 1st of 2003, they're married, they're active duty or veterans, they have students or sorry, children or dependents. At any time since the age of 13, they were either a ward of the court, orphan, or in foster care. If they're an emancipated minor or were in a legal guardianship situation, or are homeless or at risk of being homeless, and then have unusual circumstances, which we will cover in a little bit. For those not familiar, Kansas does have a foster care program for students. It's a little complicated. As you can see, there's a lot of criteria there, but It's if they were in foster care at any time after turning 13, they're considered independent, and then they can apply for financial aid. Um, and they don't have to pay tuition and fees at certain Kansas colleges. They are responsible for paying for food, housing, books, supplies, transportation, and personal expenses, but taking care of that tuition really does help. The criteria shown there, it looks like, if they were in DCF's custody and in foster care placement on or after their 18th birthday, or they were released from custody before the age of 18 and then graduated from high school or got their GED while in foster care, or they were adopted from foster care on or after their 16th birthday while in custody of DCF, or they were released from foster care placement subject to a guardianship under 38 or 59 of the KSA on or after their 16th birthday while in custody of DCF. And then they must maintain good academic standing. Definitely check out those forms, and it looks like each institution does process these differently. So just have your students check in with the university that they're applying to. Randy, do you want to go over the homelessness?
Yes, thank you. My name is Randi Whalen. I am a financial aid counselor at Southwestern College in Winfield, Kansas. What if a student is unable to add their parents' information? Homelessness and unusual circumstances. Next. Homeless students. Okay, so students who indicate they are homeless on the FAFSA are considered provisionally independent, and the school must follow up within 60 days of enrollment. So you can see on the slide the questions that apply and the pop-ups that go with them. Next. Homeless youth determination. Who can make a homeless determination? So a director or designee of an emergency or transitional shelter, street outreach program, drop-in center, or other programs serving those experiencing homelessness, a McKinney-Vento representative from a high school district homeless liaison or designee, director or designee of TRIO or Europe programs, financial aid administrators. So if the student has received a documented determination from one of these authorities, the institution may not request additional documentation, proof, or statements unless it has conflicting information about the student's status. Schools may also accept a homeless determination from another school. Sufficient documentation includes a documented phone call, a written statement, or a verifiable electronic data match. If the student is unable to provide documentation from at least one of the entities, then the school must review the student's circumstances and they'll make the determination themselves. These are based on written statements from or documented interviews with the student that confirm they are unaccompanied homeless youth or unaccompanied at risk of homelessness and self-supporting, and they are made without regard to the reasons that the student is unaccompanied and or homeless. Provisional independent statuses. Have students follow up with their school to determine what documentation they need to turn in. When they do the FAFSA, they will not have a calculated SAI or financial aid until their situation is documented and approved by their college. Schools may accept homeless youth determinations and other independent determinations from other schools, other institutions, meaning the student status can carry over from school to school. And it will be up to each school to determine what type of documents to request from the other school who initially made the determination.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about unusual circumstances. Sometimes the students might not fall into the category of homeless unaccompanied student, but they might have an unusual circumstance that would require them to not be able to add their FAFSA, or sorry, add their parents to their FAFSA. So those unusual circumstances include human trafficking, legal granted refugee or asylum status that causes them to be separated from their parents, parental abandonment or estrangement, students or parent incarceration and contact would pose a risk to the student. They left home due to an abusive environment or they cannot locate their parents. Keep in mind that unusual circumstances do not include parents who refuse to contribute to educational expenses or parents that will not provide their information on the FAFSA, or parents who do not claim the student on their tax return, or a student who demonstrates total self-sufficiency. If a student does select yes, they will be allowed to submit the FAFSA without parental information, and then they're assigned that status of provisional independent student, but then the student must follow up with the school that they're applying to. And then a financial aid administrator will make a determination regarding dependency. If for some reason a school denies the unusual circumstance request from a student, and then the student does not have a parent that's willing to provide their information on the FAFSA, there is a question on the FAFSA that is asking, do you want just unsubsidized loans only? They are able to click this. And then they will receive unsub loans, no Pell Grants, and no subsidized loans. I know some schools handle this differently, so they would need to check with their schools to see if there's any requirements needed to receive the unsub loan. And then financial aid administrators are now required to presume that any student who received a dependency override due to an unusual circumstance is going to be independent for any subsequent years after that as at the same institution. So those would just be renewed every year unless they receive some kind of conflicting information about the student's independence. And so they could just click the correct answer on the FAFSA, and the school should be able to process that renewal.
Professional judgments. Professional judgments are those made by an FAA administrator, and they apply to, they are subjective in nature. They are made on a case-by-case basis. They are not across the board. They are the financial administrator's own decision. They must be fully documented. And these apply to mostly special circumstances. So some considerations for professional judgments. Is the student or the student's family actually experiencing unique circumstances that are not dealt with adequately in the financial aid process? Does the unusual situation warrant special treatment because it affects the student's or family's ability to contribute toward the cost of the student's education or otherwise affect the student's ability to complete their program of study? What should the treatment be, and what documentation is needed to support this determination? So let's talk about some examples. If the parent or the student spouse is undocumented, they can still create a studentaid.gov account. They can still provide information on the FAFSA. It is up to a mixed status family to decide if they want to fill out the FAFSA. If the parent information is required, but parent does not want to provide information, the student will not be eligible for federal aid. They'll only be eligible for the unsubsidized loans. If the student is undocumented, They are not eligible for federal aid and they should not complete the FAFSA. They may qualify for resident tuition if they have attended an accredited Kansas high school for 3 or more years and have either graduated from an accredited Kansas high school or have earned a GED issued in Kansas and have signed and filed an affidavit with the institution stating that the person or person's parents have filed an application to legalize such person's immigration status or will file such an application as soon as such person is eligible to do so. They may, loss of income or increased expenses. Income listed on the FAFSA when it no longer reflects the student's family's current financial situation. So if things have changed since the base year to the current situation. So job loss, reduction in income, retirement, medical or dental expenses, child support or alimony that is ending, natural disasters, one-time payments. So an investment fund, an insurance payout, or an inheritance was received, or other payments, private school expenses, other children in college, or parents in college. Marital status changes are another one. In the event a student's marital status, marriage or divorce, changes after completing the FAFSA, it should be reported to the school as it can change a student's eligibility for aid. So it may change them from dependent versus independent status and or result in a loss of income on the FAFSA. If the parent's marital status changes, divorce or separation, after completing the FAFSA, it should be reported to the school as it can result in a loss of income on the FAFSA, potentially making the student eligible for better or more aid. The death of a parent or a spouse. The death of a parent or a student spouse can have a significant financial hardship on a family. It should be reported to the school as it can result in a loss of income on the FAFSA, potentially making the student eligible for better or more aid. Then there are cost of attendance adjustments. So cost of attendance includes tuition and fees, books and supplies, computer, housing and food, transportation, professional license, medical, dental, or disability, childcare, or study abroad. You can access these resources to learn more about what we've discussed in the presentation today. Are there any questions?
I don't see any in the chat, but the recording of this webinar, as well as the links to everything that was taught today, will be up on our website in the KASFAA resources page, probably in a couple of weeks for reference. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, I have a question. I'm wondering about, I have a student whose parents are now separated. They were together last year, so their income is significantly less. And I'm wondering what kind of documentation they need if it's not a legal divorce.
Randy or Michelle, do any of you have answer?
I mean, normally if they're separated before filing the FAFSA, they would need to mark on the FAFSA that they are separated, and then enter in the tax information. I think it will make them put in a manual amount at that point. But if it's after the FAFSA has been filed, that they got separated, um, they could submit a PJ to the school, and it just really depends on the school as to what they require. I know for my school, they're required to submit the last like um, 2 tax years of information, and then I think they have to show something that shows that they're separated. I'm not quite sure what they do when it's not a legal separation, maybe a different address or something like that, like documentation that shows that they're living at different addresses. But that's all I know. Randy or Michelle, do you have any other ideas on that?
I know that it does depend on the institution. At our school, it would be the most likely be the taxes, W-2s may be requested, and as you said, it would be most likely required to enter tax information manually.
Did that answer your question?
Well, I know that she's already filed, and the tax information from the previous year reflects both parents. Um, and I believe mom put separated on there. Um, but obviously the FAFSA identified them as having more income than they currently have. So I was just kind of trying to think what the student could present, that would, provide a professional judgment in her favor.
Right. Okay, yeah. Then in that case, definitely they would want to submit the tax returns. And then the mother's, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. The mother's W-2 from that particular year. So like if it is for the 26-27 academic year, it would be for 2024. And then the financial aid administrators could do a professional judgment on that to separate out the mother's income from the filed jointly income, and then base the FAFSA and the student need off of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Yeah.
That's just want to confirm that's basically the same with like a divorce, right? I do have a student whose parents are divorcing.
Yes, that would be the same.
Okay. This is probably a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So if a student wants to apply to several different colleges and review financial aid packages, they have to apply first, correct? Is that right? Or can they just list the different schools or colleges on the FAFSA and get an answer?
No, they would have to apply to every school first.
Okay.
Most universities or colleges will not bring in FAFSA data unless they have an admitted student on their record. Some of them anyway, no state schools are like that. So they would definitely have to apply to all the schools that they're considering as well.
Okay. So it would be a good idea to have them do the free days.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions for today? Okay, well, sounds good. If you have any other questions later on, feel free to reach out to either one of us or just the KASFAA. We've got a bunch of individuals who can help with that, or even the financial aid offices at the institutions your students are looking to go to. So thanks for joining us today. Have a good one.
Thanks.